dear ladies and gentlemen, in accordance with the address of Syria's president and the decision of the Supreme Commander, beginning September 30, 2015, after a notification was sent to the interested states, the military aircraft, the combat aircraft of the Russia's aerospace forces delivered target strikes at some objects of the international terrorist groups ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra in Syria. At the beginning of our combat operation, the situation in this country was critical. The government of Syria, acting on, actually on its own, delivered combat operations against terrorism on its territory, and the so-called moderate opposition, in fact, merged with ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra. The terrorists exercised control over 70% of the country's territory and continued to advance in all areas of the country. The country's resources were depleted. So there was a threat not only to the Syrian state, but also to the security of the entire region. So the flourishing country turned into a source of terrorist threat for the entire Middle East. According to now estimates, by the beginning of 2015, among ISIS and other terrorist groups, there were about 4.5 thousand Russia's citizens and CIS countries. As a result of aerospace forces of Russia, as a result of airstrikes, a considerable damage was made to the system of management and the logistics infrastructure of terrorists. So we blocked the key routes for the supply of terrorists and with the weapons and armaments. We have to know that all the targets were delivered, all the strikes were delivered against targets that have been confirmed by the intelligence data and also by the space reconnaissance and drones. So in these areas, the very presence of terrorists was fully excluded. By the beginning of operation in the airbase Khmeimim, within the shortest period of time, an aircraft group was set up consisting of modern-day and upgraded types of aircraft which were equipped with the state-of-the-art navigation equipment that allowed us to deliver strikes against the entire territory. The efficiency of combat actions facilitated the use of unmanned aerial vehicles. Right now we use about 80 drones. Russia is using about 80 drones on Syria's territory. To ensure the management and command of the combat operation in Syria with the use of most up-to-date types of communications, we have a multi-level system of management. It allows the command of the Russian grouping using the Khmeimim airfield to exercise control over the entire territory. We use also cruise missiles of the ship and sea-based cruise missiles from submarines and strategic missile carriers with a range of up to 1,500 kilometers. The Russian aircraft group in certain periods of operation ensured fulfillment of various types of combat objectives. The maximum number of combat aviation that took part between November 2016 up to January 10, 2017 did not exceed 35 aircraft. As we introduced the regime of stopping combat activities, and as the situation stabilized on Syria's territory and the number of terrorist formations decreased, it allowed Russia to actually withdraw half of the aviation group, which was based in Khmeimim. A comparative analysis of the actions done by Russian aviation revealed that the Russia's aerospace forces made many times less aircraft strikes and 3 times more of combat strikes and 4 times more missile and bomb strikes. All in all, it was about 74,000 aviation strikes. Considerable assistance is rendered by the Russian military advisors that participate in the planning of combat operations, ensuring reconnaissance information, training and drilling the Syrian armed forces and also people's militia. Our military specialists are coordinating the strikes of the aerospace forces with the government forces in Syria on the ground. So an example is operation aimed at liberation of Palmyra, which was performed in March this year under the guidance of Russian military advisors. Over the 6 weeks, the government troops and the people's militia trying to rebuff the terrorist action in highland areas, actually exterminate the group of ICs and advance more than 60 kilometers, establishing full control over Palmyra. As a result of this operation, terrorists lost more than 1,000 people. So at present, the government forces are expanding the area of security around Palmyra, and they are acting in concert with the Russian aviation. The actions of the Russian group allowed the Syrian armed forces to turn the balance of the forces and ensure the breakthrough in the situation in Syria. Today, the major formations of terrorists in Khan and Homs are were actually exterminated, and also the oil and gas fields Giselle, Hayam and Magara were returned to under the government control. The main event of last year was the liberation of Aleppo, and this victory has not only a military but a political significance for the entire country. This year we also managed to exterminate the major group of the terrorist group, ISIS group, north of Aleppo. We are also successfully developing an onslaught of the government forces in the northeastern province of Aleppo. In the meantime, we have not managed to fully do away with the potential of terrorists. They are still ready to continue uncompromised fight. A number of formations, beginning 21st of March, made an attempt of attack at Hama. There were about 10,000 terrorists that participated in this onslaught, the mostly comprised of Jabhat al-Nusra troops. But now the situation has stabilized and the terrorists were actually received a rebuff and now more than 10 kilometers outside the area. As a result of these battles in the area, more than 4,500 terrorists were killed, 68 units of armored equipment, 22 jihad mobiles, and more than 150 automobiles. All in all, we managed to return 692 populated areas and over 135,000 square kilometers of different territories, which allowed to return to the permanent areas of settlement over 108,000 refugees. The experience of our fights against terrorism has revealed that military measures alone are not capable of resolving this crisis. So we have to do certain work ensuring that the population of these territories receive proper assistance. With this aim in view, we have created a center for reconciliation of the warring parties. The branches of the center are developed in provinces Aleppo, Damascus, Homs, and Latakia. Since February 2016, we have performed 1,085 humanitarian actions, delivering over 1,610 tons of foodstuffs, medications, and other necessary things. We also actually delivered to this area using the aircraft carriers 1,869 tons of different types of commodities. Also, we delivered the delivery of foodstuffs to the city of Deir ez-Zor with a total weight of 4,305 tons. The most vivid example of the operations of the Russian center is the humanitarian operation to liberate Aleppo. Overall, during this military operation, we managed to pull out about 108,000 local residents, including 47,000 children. In the process, in the course of this unique and very complex humanitarian operation in Idlib, there were about 28,000 terrorists and members of their families who were delivered to Idlib. The military police servicemen of the Russian Federation also put a lot of effort to maintain order in the city. Also, assistance was rendered by the military medical personnel of the Ministry of Defense of Russia. Skilled medical assistance was rendered to more than 14,000 people. We continue work to restore housing, schools, hospitals, and other social infrastructure facilities in Aleppo, which allowed over 56,000 people to return back to their homes. The experience that we accumulated as a result of these operations in liberating Aleppo has been successfully used in other areas of Syria. So this real change in the situation in Syria allowed us to take a completely new view of the current balance of forces in the region, which was actually facilitated by the regular international meetings in Astana format. So we managed to get together the Syrian government delegation and also the leaders of some armed forces and representatives of the opposition, representatives from Turkey, Syria, Iran, and with the participation of UN representatives. As a result of the agreement between the armed opposition and the Syrian government, beginning December 30, 2016, the regime of no military action is in force, is in effect in Syria. Today, 204 groups of the moderate opposition have declared that they stick to this regime. So these measures allowed us actually to activate the process of reaching agreements on truce with local administrations and armed groups. Currently, we've reached an agreement with heads of 1,464 residential areas with a population of more than 6 million people. On the liberated territories, the specialists of the International Anti-Mining Center of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation have done a humanitarian demining of the territories. In Aleppo alone, we detected and unmined 66,000 tons of explosives. The armed forces of the Russian Federation is making an analysis of the situation in the Syrian Republic. So we note at this point the following. First of all, modern terrorist organizations have really large-scale goals and are ready, in the achievement of the goals, they are ready for an open confrontation with the legal power forces. International terrorism does not have any national borders. That is why, in order to achieve victory, we need the concerted effort of all interested parties and all international organizations. And the special role in this work, as regards dissemination of terrorist ideas, we need to deprives the local terrorist of the support of the local population. The armed forces must have the relevant training to this aim in view, and using all types of methods, but not all these methods are efficient.
Number 4, fighting terrorism using peaceful citizen as a human shield requires that the troops be able delivering pinpoint surgical strikes to exclude victims among population. In the first place, we should hit the economic base, rear infrastructure, command and control system, and prevent the militants from maneuvering. In conclusion, let me emphasize that now Syria the airspace group continues to function in Syria, and the logistic point of Navy is functioning in Tartus. This makes it possible to keep a strategic balance in the region and prevent the dissemination of terrorist groups in Syria and neighboring countries. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you so much. If you pay attention, we allotted more time. My job is to explain that ministers got more time than speakers at this session. Since we have a lot of time, we can be flexible. Next speaker is Co-General Mahmoud Avalshava, Deputy Minister of Defense of the Syrian Republic. He is specializing in communications. General Shava underwent past all steps of military service. He headed the military academy of the Syrian Armed Forces, Deputy Chief of the Syrian General Staff, and since he's Deputy Minister of the Syrian Arab Republic since 30th of January 16. I'm happy to see him. He studied to the Soviet Union, and we're walking in Odessa streets at the same time. The General, the floor is yours. Thank you. Dear friends, our conference today is taking in the background of important changes in our regions. Dangerous events are taking place, posing a danger to our nations. And this connection, our conference acquires huge importance, dictated by the need to determine ways to combat terrorism, to curb its spread and dissemination, to liquidate the threat, and to prevent its consequences, which are catastrophic. We as Syrians, taking part in this conference today, confirm again the need to seriously build up mutual cooperation between all states and countries in destroying the threat of terrorism. No nation is insured against terrorism. We all know that the spirit of terrorism for many years is tormenting our region and our other countries. It's not a period of thin air. There are reasons, and there are a number of factors that contribute to the spread of terrorism, and there are actions of parties which help to the plans and designs of terrorists. They receive some kind of help. If it not for the ideal sources supporting extremist theory, they wouldn't be able lately to spread in the societies of many countries, especially given that there are no restraining factors in legislation and there are no government barriers on the way to the terrorist spread. Let me mention the importance of the environment in which these ideas are cultivated and are spread by individuals and groups. There are also economic and cultural factors that serve as a breeding ground for such ideas. Poverty, lack of basic needs, illiteracy, backwardness, lack of development are important factors in molding the breeding ground for terrorism. The basis is not just sexual or religion creed, but social, cultural, and economic conditions of life. Terrorism does not state borders or regional borders. It is ready to spread in any directions. One can say the threat of international terrorism is a consequence of a lack of international determination and firmness to rebuff the violations of international treaties to those who perpetrate them. And there is no coordinated definition of terrorism that would cover all manifestations and the reasons of terrorism. And this leaves loopholes for some to use and to take care about terrorism, which enables terrorist organizations to act and to move under the cover of legitimacy granted by some forces in this world. There's a lack of coordination in some positions concerning terrorism and the unwillingness to take part in fighting terrorism and its spread. It is an important factor which contributes to the threat, especially this is noticeable in the policy of double standards. Selectiveness in treating terrorism gives ground for dissemination of terrorism and makes it difficult to eradicate the root causes of terrorism, and our actions will be of limited nature, and we will not be able to exterminate terrorism without liquidating the causes of terrorism and cutting the channel of supplying terrorism. The situation will deteriorate because of the intensive growth of terrorist groupings, and the internal splits make them even more cruel. It is what we see here in Syria, where terrorist organizations split and give birth to different organizations under different names. But in terms of the extremist activities, methods of crimes, there are no difference from the paternal organization. Maybe they pose even more danger. Speaking about the international terrorism, we should mention intercontinental terrorism when terrorism has some kind of ideal basis. The threat is not limited to the country it is located in, or the region it is located in. Terrorism in the person of organization Al-Qaeda or ISIS is not just a national organization that would be limited to a certain state. It is international terrorism based on purposes and programs that do not recognize the state or its borders. The state could counter terrorist threats emanating from the terrorist organization operating on the basis of various plans, but to fight international trans-border and transcontinental terrorism, serious international will and coordination is needed. Actions of security forces of various countries are required that would provide restraint of terrorist threat. Fighting terrorism requires implementation of international norms and developing a balanced policy without any double standards in the definition of terrorism. Measures are needed to eradicate terrorism based on rebuff of terrorism, colonial expansion, hegemonism, and use of terrorism as a policy tool. We should respect national cultural features of countries and punish countries that support and that finance terrorism. Equal development of all nations should be promoted. all beliefs should be treated in an unbiased nation to live in peace and concord. Fighting terrorism and prevention of terrorism, eradication of its consequences should be made with the use of scientific criteria, because use of traditional methods alone in fighting, in ensuring security, does not allow us to use objective, full eradication of terrorism. We should pay attention to the activities of the intelligence community on gathering information on goals of terrorist organization and about the source of their financing. It is important to make an agreement on the security between neighboring nations that would provide harmonic cooperation between nations in the fight against terrorism, exchange of information, and building mutual securities. We should use of communication technologies, facilitated contacts between the members of terrorist cells and organizations, and helps them to resolve their mission, accomplish their goals. What's more, some mass media, radio, satellite television, internet too, became now highlight terrorist attacks, granting huge possibilities for terrorists who try to wage propaganda of their ideas, justifying their actions. Therefore, we need to find a form of exercising control over these mass media networks, reveal and punish the heads of satellite channels and radio stations heads who directly or indirectly advertise terrorism. Syria, for a number of 6 years, is suffering from terrorism and is trying its best to return the country to security and safety and guarantee the future of its children, applying a lot of efforts in cooperation with many countries to put an end to international terrorism and eradicate its sources. However, it demands that international community fulfill its international debt to Syrian people and all other nations of our regions. For many years, they have been suffering from the consequences of the war and terrorism and subjected to destruction, trying to destroy our cultural heritage. Our people, like all nations, have the right to live and determine its destiny independently without exploitation. However, methods some forces supporting terrorism use and have no respect for humanitarian moral laws should be abandoned. In conclusion, from this rostrum, we call upon pull international efforts to fight counter-terrorism and take real actions to eradicate terrorism using the whole range of political, economic, information, intelligence and other methods of fighting terrorism to counter the spread of terrorism. We should support any possibilities of strengthening stability, security in our regions. Thank you so much. Thank you, General. All questions for the speaker should be addressed later. After two persons that are here, I can see one. Next, Deputy Minister of Defense, Major General Abdel Fattah, artillery man who went through all steps of their military career, who was at the front in the Desert Storm. He was Deputy Minister of Defense. Since, Mr. General, the floor is yours.
أستاذن حضرتك دلوقتي إن من الصعب إن الواحد يتحدث بعد تناول وجبة الغداء، معظم الناس بتبقى تميل للنوم، فإحنا قدام تحديات، يا إما أعلي صوتي بحيث إن الكل يصحى، أو أختصر أو أتكلم بسرعة، السادة اللي هيترجموا مش هيلحقوا يلحقوني ويترجموا الترجمة الصحيحة. ولكن اعتقد ان انا حميل ان انا اعلي صوتي بحيث ان الكل يصحى بعد وقت. يسعدني طبعا ان ويشرفني ان انا اكون بينكم في المؤتمر موسكو السادس لنتبادل الفكر والرؤى حول موضوع.
Let me welcome all you at the 6th International Conference on Security Issues, and thank you all for considering such an important issue as fighting terrorism. Egypt is also facing the threat of terrorism. I'd like to express, on behalf of the Egyptian people, condolences to the relatives of victims that fell victims to a terrorist attack in the metro in St. Petersburg recently. And we highly appreciate the actions of the Russian Federation in fighting terrorism. And yes, indeed, we can say that terrorism became more dangerous than before for all of us. There is no difference for terrorists which country to attack, and the majority of countries are subjected to the terrorist threat and to the terrorist danger. Given the turbulent development of technologies, we can see how terrorists use these means, recruit new members of their cells, and despite some success reached, nevertheless, the latest events indicate that terrorists successfully try to mobilize their ranks and to recruit new members among young people. This poses a special danger, as this is especially true in connection with the Middle East events, where several years back, as you know, the so-called the Arab Spring started. Here, you should pay special attention to the danger we are facing now in connection with the declared, the so-called caliphate and the interaction between various terrorist groupings which use the ideological principle of the Islamic State, what we call Daesh, Islamic State. And there is a caliph and there's a ruler of the Muslims and other steps. Therefore, the declaration of the so-called jihad against all those who disagree with their extremist views poses grave danger for all of us. All this is displayed, transpires in a different way. Earlier, they recruit young people to become members of terrorist organization. This is happening through social networks, and they appeal to various, not only religious feelings, and such recruitment happens on a regular basis. Certainly, attempts are made to expand the number of those being recruited by the so-called defenders of Islam. Creation of the caliphate contradicts our ideas of the need to do everything possible to portray Islam in its true light. We must act with cohesion and act not only against organized crimes, but also against terrorist organization, against all those who finance them. We must realize the danger emanating from those terrorist groupings, because they tend to expand the geography of their activities and commit terrorist attacks. And they use various methods of clandestine operations, guerrilla techniques, methods of suicide, soul suicides, which no information, which don't have information about the cells they are connected to. Special danger is recruitment of new members through the internet. Many countries are facing this danger, and for this reason we must jointly, together, fight against terrorism and developing a strategy, clear strategy of fighting terrorism and extremism, attracting the respective bodies and commissions to fight terrorism within the UN. But the most important, we must do everything.
So we'll have to do everything to eradicate terrorism that leads to the dissemination of this threat right now, the beginning of the 21st century. We have to cooperate closely, share our data so as to have a clear-cut vision of who we are dealing with, to work more consistently in our security bodies. We also must rely on the support of the population, the support of the broad masses of people in our activities. Without that, it will be very difficult for us to fight terrorism and to engage in this fight against terrorism. So we must undertake every security measure when there is a need for that, and in our everyday lives as well. So we have to pay special attention to that. Special attention has to be paid to the protection of our borders. From the political viewpoint, it is necessary to intensify diplomatic contacts between the relevant foreign agencies, exchange data, share our information in the United Nations Security Council and other international organizations. We have to do everything in our power to coordinate our actions so as to proceed from the understanding of the threat that we have to deal with, and also in order to we must clearly understand that we have to fight a really destructive force, and this is an evil force, and we must certainly defeat these forces. In closing, I would like to say that we shouldn't allow terrorism to expand its activities, and we should not capitulate to the threat of capitalism. Thank you. Well, in fact, for the Russian population, Egypt is one of the favorite countries for the Russian people, where many people who want to travel, to go for a holiday, would prefer to go. And so the people who get together here know very well about the war that is waged by the Egyptian army and security forces. It's an uncompromising war, and we must be winners in this war. If we are defeated in this war, if we are losing this war, there will be no parties there, and the Americans, there will be no winners. Americans saw this on the 11th of September. The next one is Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Jordan Hashemite Kingdom, Mahmoud Abdel Halim Freyhat. He is tank commander, and he made a military career, and frankly speaking, when I looked at his biography, I was really pleased, because when I became a lieutenant and commander of the tank platoon in 1981, and he became one in 1983, but he remained in the army, and he now achieved what he is right now. So, Mr. General, the floor is yours, please. For the sake of Allah, please let me extend my gratitude to the Ministry of Defense for this invitation to participate in this conference that is held in the conditions of extremely important regional and international conditions to ensure coordination and pulling our efforts in fighting terrorism in conditions of wide dissemination of terrorism and extremism that has covered all countries and societies. No one can feel insured and protected against this worldwide phenomenon, which is also due to other phenomena. Of course, the reasons behind this are in the bad, deplorable economic conditions, the lack of very bad economic conditions in certain countries, and the problems faced by the younger generations in many countries, where terrorism finds fruitful ground, attracting young people in such conditions that these countries have to live through. Our previous experience proved that the fight against terrorism and extremism is not limited to just security and military problems, as it requires interaction and joint search for common solutions and the true reasons that have led to the appearance of extremism and terrorism in the first place. So, for example, ISIS is a result of socio-economic conditions that were related to deep-rooted problems among these nations who suffered from a deplorable economic situation. We also have to focus on the questions of security, ideological struggle against terrorism and extremism, and our current efforts can be quite helpful in order to fight with the existing terrorist organizations. However, we need to pull our efforts so as to liquidate the factors that encourage terrorist action. So at this point, although there have been some successes, Jordan was one of the countries that suffered from terrorism and is now fighting terrorism in the region. The Shiite Jordanian kingdom is one of the countries that is targeted by terrorists, and we've seen repeatedly that it is capable of rebuffing the attempts of these organizations. And of course, we are still decisive and are ready to fight terrorism in Jordan. So this phenomenon requires cooperation among all nations of the world. So we need to stop any kind of support for terrorist organizations. It's also we need to pull maximum efforts, and that's what we do in Jordan. We've repeatedly stressed in Jordan that we are absolutely excluding terrorism in any form, in any format, and Jordan has signed many international agreements on the fight against terrorism, adhering to all its obligations in this respect, proceeding from these treaties and conventions. Jordan's strategy in its fight against terrorism and against extremism rests on the actual objectives and the search for the reasons behind the emergence of terrorism, as we try to pool efforts to unite all forces in the society so as to ensure a success of this struggle, which requires a coordination of our efforts, strengthening moderate and religious propaganda. We also have to achieve cultural pluralism, respect for other persons' opinions, accepting other people's opinions. The King of Jordan, who is a commander-in-chief of the armed forces of our country, has clearly demonstrated that it is necessary to show the true face of the moderate Islam. As we launched the initiative, the Letter of Oman, which is precisely dealing with this, disseminating the ideas of rapprochement and reconciliation among the neighboring countries. So we pay a great deal of attention to work among the younger generation and the families, so as to ensure that there should not be a fruitful breeding ground for terrorism. So we need to fight poverty, unemployment, and we have to, of course, ensure that the terrorist organizations receive no support in current economic conditions. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we abide by our obligations proceeding from international treaties and conventions that are related to fight against terrorism and extremism at all levels. And we believe that the fight against terrorism is not limited to just one country or one region. We need a responsibility of all countries pulling our efforts so as to put an end to the threat of terrorism. Without that, we won't be able to achieve success. And closing, would like to say thanks to the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation for this invitation. Peace with you. Be peace with you. Thank you, Mr. General. Let me know that all the speakers today, until the including the last one, are generals, people who have gone through the war. And in fact, those who think that generals love to fight, to combat, you know that these people saw what it means. It's blood and death. They have to risk their lives and to send their friends and mates to die. And so I think they are probably the last people who want to continue this war, professional servicemen. And the next one and the last of our speakers is Vice President of the International Red Cross Committee, Christine Burley, a representative of Switzerland, the country that actually presented the Red Cross to the humanity, and she was a very successful politician in Switzerland. He was a member of the municipal council in the Bailey and the Bern Canton legislative branch, the deputy of the Swiss Parliament and chairman of the International Committee. And today she's vice president of the International Red Cross Committee, member of the Assembly and the Red Cross Council, the organization which does not have to be introduced here. Please, Ms. Burley.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a privilege to be addressing this audience today on behalf of the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, and I would like to thank the Ministry of Defense for the invitation. My remarks will focus purely on the humanitarian dimension of what has become a highly complex, multi-dimensional battlefield in the region, one with tangled and competing ideological and political interests at local, regional and global levels. While it would be naive to believe that humanitarian action can happen in a political vacuum, it is crucial for a humanitarian organization like the ICRC that its approach and objectives remain clearly distinct from any political, military or economic agenda. Of course, when we talk about the Middle East, the armed conflict in Syria and its catastrophic humanitarian impact on people in and beyond the country continues to be pivotal. With over 5 million refugees being hosted mainly by neighboring countries and more than 6.2 million internally displaced, Syria has become the world's single largest driver of displacement and has alone made the Middle East the biggest producer and host of displaced people. Millions more live in besieged or hard-to-reach areas in desperate humanitarian need. Meanwhile, the situation in Yemen has become increasingly 2 years of intensifying conflict have caused spiraling humanitarian needs on a massive scale, including soaring levels of acute malnutrition and the risk of famine, especially among children. Similarly, in Iraq, an upsurge in the hostilities since 2016 has caused unprecedented levels of humanitarian needs throughout the country, with huge numbers of people fleeing fighting in Mosul and many other areas as well. The occupied Palestinian territories too are continuing to suffer the effects of a long-term occupation. And as we see from the continued arrival on Europe's shore and borders of large numbers of migrants, including refugees and asylum seekers, the consequences of the armed conflict in countries like Syria and the lack of viable political solutions so far to end conflicts are not contained within the region itself. Much of the suffering we are witnessing in the context of armed conflicts in the Middle East today is a direct consequence of flagrant violations of international humanitarian law, IHL, committed by various parties, mostly with impunity and in some cases glorified on social media and used for propaganda purposes. The overriding problem is widespread lack of respect for and protection of the civilian population. Violence against healthcare and more broadly against humanitarian workers is one of the most worrying trends we are currently witnessing, not least because of the extremely far-reaching consequences. Direct attacks on healthcare facilities and ambulances and the killing or wounding of staff and patients are one part of the problem. Many hundreds of attacks have been reported in Syria, Yemen and Iraq in recent years on all sides of front lines. While the statistics are numbing, the impact of each attack goes far beyond an immediate loss. To give just one example, following the destruction of one of the hospitals in Yemen's Sala province in October 2015, Médecins Sans Frontières reported that at least 200,000 people were left without access to vital medical care. Over 160 such attacks have been reported in the ICRC since the current conflict in Yemen began in 2015. Less than half of the country's healthcare facilities are now functioning. The Russian military also knows the far-reaching consequences of such incidents, having suffered an attack on one of its field hospitals in Aleppo, Syria, in December of last year. Even where healthcare facilities are functioning, reaching them may be fraught with danger and fear. Obstacles and threats directed by the state and by non-state armies and health workers and humanitarian organizations that are used to help the other side impede access to entire communities in need of vital medical care. For the ICRC, whose core mission is to protect and assist people affected by armed conflict and other situations of violence, ensuring a sustained and principled humanitarian response in the conflict affected countries and their regional neighbors is vital. Our long-standing presence in practically all of these countries in the region is testimony to our commitment. To this end, securing acceptance for our work from all communities and political and military groups is essential. This requires a clear demonstration of impartiality, the provision of humanitarian assistance based exclusively on actual needs as well as neutrality and independence. This entails engaging with all stakeholders, including those deemed terrorists by some parties. This is vital not only to gain acceptance, but also access to as many vulnerable people as possible on all sides of front lines. The single most effective way to reduce the terrible suffering we are witnessing is without doubt improving respect for international humanitarian law and the basic principle of humanity. Working to ensure respect for IHL is at the heart of our mandate and mission on legal policy and operational level. For example, we engage in a wide range of activities to advise and support parties to our conflict, both state and non-state, on IHL and its implementation. Ultimately, primary responsibility for compliance with IHL lies with the parties to our conflict themselves. There is a need, however, for a broad, concerted international effort to improve compliance with the law. This means that all states must at all times ensure respect for international humanitarian law and do their best to ensure that the other actors, particularly their partners and allies, do the same. There are countless ways in which supporting and providing AHL training to their partner states and non-state actors alike, including with regard to respect for and protection of the medical mission, is just one example. It means avoiding labeling arms as terrorists simply to deny the application of IHL in an armed conflict, and it also means national legislators and schools fulfilling their responsibilities of ensuring that domestic legislation recognizes the criminal responsibility of those who violate IHL and of actually enforcing such legislation. Perpetrators of the violations must be held accountable. There are some grounds for hope. On a political level, the UN Security Council passed a resolution in 2016 specifically on the protection of medical issues in armed conflicts, reaffirming the crucial importance of IHL compliance to this end. The Russian Federation itself has repeatedly expressed its concern over the plight of civilians, protection of medical facilities, and other humanitarian issues in the Syria conflict. On a practical level, cooperation between the ICRC and the Russian Federation, among others, helped facilitate the evacuation of some 35,000 people from Aleppo last December, to give just one example. Faced with the enormity of the humanitarian challenges today, much more needs to be done by all of us. The challenges are much too waste for one organization or even one section to tackle. For the ICRC, this means expanding our interaction with strategically important states, the Russian Federation being one of them, and also continuing to seek ways to better engage non-state armed groups. It means strengthening partnership with the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement and seeking greater levels of pragmatic cooperation with specialized UN agencies, neutral and impartial humanitarian NGOs on the ground, and the private sector. Ultimately, it is upon states and non-state armed groups, both of whom are bound by the coalition of IHL, to show the requisite political will to turn legal and political coalitions into a meaningful reality and to show good faith in protecting the victims of armed conflict as well as those who help them. Not only will this help to alleviate the suffering we are witnessing in the here and now, it will help pave the way for political dialogue and